Now, we do know that Rwanda is rated one of the fastest growing countries in the world. It's one of the fastest growing countries in Africa. It's been very consistent in its reforms. Lots of opportunities in Rwanda. But where should investors be looking off the beaten track?
Sorry, yes, I mean, Rwanda is a very exciting place. I think you've hit on the big reasons why. But I think one important point as well, it's one of the global reformers. And, you know, we decided to have this conference here because we've had 2 IPOs here this year, all with significant foreign interest. And the secret and the word is getting out, and people are curious. They wanted to come and see for themselves what Rwanda is all about. And we've had a significant amount of investor interest so far, so we're very pleased.
Okay, where should investors be investing, Patrick? We know of the ICT revolution in Rwanda. We also know it's an agrarian economy. But what other opportunities exist there?
I mean, if you look at Rwanda, it's really starting from a low base. I think we all know the history. You look at mobile or telcos, penetration rates are in the 30% area versus, Kenya, which is in the mid-60s. You look at the banking sectors, the numbers are very similar, mid-30s versus 60s. So it is a lot of headroom for growth, and a lot of investors are looking at that. I mean, all the sectors are generally lagging some of the other bigger economies in the region. And with the region integrating, I think it's very clear there's going to be some convergence. And now is the time to be looking at that and to be playing for that growth.
Now, you mentioned that Rwanda was one of the world's greatest reformers, and we know this. They rank very highly on the World Bank's ratings of doing business. There's been a lot of efforts to just make it easier to transact, to set up a business and to register a company and those sorts of things. But despite all those reforms, Rwanda is still struggling to attract foreign direct investment. It's certainly not doing it at the pace of other countries within the East African communities and in Africa at large. What do they need to do to elevate the game?
Well, I think there are some structural problems, and, these are things that they're addressing. I mean, for instance, one of them is getting a skilled labor force in a significant size. It's very difficult to come in and, get 30, 50 mid-level managers ready to do business. That's why there's a lot of foreign workers from the region in Rwanda. But that's being addressed over time. And, I think you're beginning to see the results of the investments they've made into education, into ICT, to try and kind of narrow the gap from that perspective. They also are trying, and I think they've done a significantly better job than some of the region in terms of managing the currency inflation and also managing the currency depreciation. I mean, if you look at Rwanda, inflation is in the 8% area, and, the neighbors are kind of in the high teens. And, if you think about Rwanda not being a resource-rich country, there's definitely something they're doing right.
Liquidity, you mentioned 2 major IPOs, and we did follow the story of Banque de Kigali and also Bralirwa, oversubscription, but it's 2 major stocks. The issue here is trying to get a lot more companies listed, trying to raise the profile of the private sector in Rwanda. What can be done? Because I think a lot of what we're seeing in terms of economic engineering is happening from the office of the president. What else needs to be done to support these efforts?
Well, I think the president, and the government has to go through their privatization process. I think generally when economies like this are developing and stock markets are getting out of infancy, and we saw this in Kenya, we've seen it in Uganda, the biggest supplier of IPOs is the government. So, it's not surprising that the government is very much front and center in deciding what are the, gems or assets to put on the market. But I think more importantly, I think that as the capital comes in and some of these companies begin to scale up, they will reach the size and the level that, that we can start to list them. And, don't underestimate the fact that the region is integrating. So you can't really just look at Rwanda as a market on its own. I think there's significant parts of the DRC, parts of southern Uganda, all that fall into this spectrum. So you can set up a business there that is much bigger than Rwanda, if you will. Okay. And I think we're getting there. All this FDI that's beginning to flow in the country is going to be helpful.